And today we will be talking about image processing in manufacturing. In this, we are going to talk about imaging requirements for imaging. Now, let's start with the understanding of what do you mean by geometric model for imaging. Okay, so uh, we have been studying in manufacturing or in mechanical engineering. We have studied this subject called as CAX, which encapsulates nothing but your CAD, CAM, and CAE. Okay, so CAD stands for computer aided design, CAM stands for computer aided manufacturing, and CAE stands for computer aided engineering. In CAD again you have CGM, which stands for computer model geometric modeling, and then you also have CAD, which also stands for computer aided drafting. So the difference between these two is essentially this is a 2D drafting, okay, and this is 3D modeling. That's the only basic difference. Then in case of CAM, what we do is we import the CAD model, and then we try to optimize the tool part to manufacture the features that we have designed or that we have created in the CAD model. Okay, so CAM is usually used for tool part designs. Okay, that tool path can be for milling, drilling, forming. It can be for welding as well. Okay, for any manufacturing process, if you need a tool path, you can make use of this CAM software. Another thing is CAE, which stands for computer aided engineering, which again is subdivided into two major field or broad fields. Those are FEA and CFD. FEA stands for finite element analysis, where we do structural analysis or thermal analysis of a given product or a component that you might have designed or drafted using CAD. And you can also carry out computational fluid dynamics, that is CFD analysis, wherein you can check what is the flow, how it is interacting, how the flow is interacting. You can also do various thermal analysis using CFD. Okay, so this is the application of geometric models which are created using image processing. Now let's try to understand the requirements for this geometric model for imaging. Okay, so computer geometric modeling is the mathematical representation of an object's geometry using software. So when we say geometric modeling, usually it is only computer geometric modeling, and what it signifies is the mathematical equations for a given structure that can be represented onto a screen using various interfaces. Okay, a geometric model contains description of modeled object's shape. Since geometric shapes are described by surfaces, curves are used to construct them. So since we are going to make use of mathematical equations, uh, we further simplify the structure into various surfaces. Those surfaces can further be simplified using curves, for example. Okay, so let's say if I have such surface. Okay, if this is my surface, let's say this is my sheet metal. Okay, which is a part of some casing which has some certain curvature in various axes. Now this I can represent how I can represent with this curvature, isn't it? This I can label it as, let's say, F, and it has a definite start position and a stop position. So maybe I can write A comma B, isn't it? Then if I want to describe this curvature, again I can represent it in the form of, let's say, G of X comma Y, where this X represent this coordinate and Y represent this position in the space. So these two curves are sufficient for me to construct this entire surface for visualization, isn't it? So and these curves can be of different types. You may be aware of Bezier curve, or there are different types of curves which can be used to reconstruct the surfaces. Okay. So computer geometric modeling uses curves to control the object surfaces as they are easy to manipulate. The curves may be constructed using analytical functions, a set of points, or other curves and surfaces. There are a number of software programs that then allow the mathematical description of the object to be displayed as an image on the monitor. Like I said, we can represent the geometry in the forms of curves, which again can be modeled into mathematical equations, which is easy for the computer to process. Okay, so when we are saving a certain let's say surface in a software, then what we are saving in, or what we are registering in the computer's memory, is nothing but the equation. Okay, and as and when you open the interface and you look up for the memory, when you select that memory, what is projected on the screen is nothing but the effect of that equation. Okay, geometric model of an object can be created using three steps. Now, what are these three steps? Create basic geometry, a geometric object using the command like point, line, circle in CAD software. Then second is what? Use commands like achieve, scaling, rotation, etc. to transform these geometric elements. And third is integrate the various elements of the object to form the final geometric model. So this, I think you might be aware, you must have used, let's say, solid edge or solidwork or Pro E CATIA, any 3D modeling software, CAD software. So in that, what is the first step? First you draw a basic shape. Let's say you may draw a rectangle. Okay, so first you may draw a rectangle like this. Okay, with certain again, my diagram is not perfect, so please excuse me. So let's say you define it with certain, length, with certain uh, breadth. Okay, so LNB defines the length and breadth for a given rectangle. Then what you do, then probably you want to create, uh, let's say you're modeling a sound bar. Okay, which is something like this, which has certain slots for your speaker, and this is what you want to model. Okay, and this is in 3D, so something like this. So how you may start doing this, either you can start creating a rectangle using this face or on at the bottom face. Okay, one of them. So let's say I start with the bottom face. Okay, now I have created this part of the sound bar. Then what I'll do, this first part is done. Then what I'll do, I will probably go for extrusion. Okay, so I'll extrude this rectangle in this. Okay, so something like this. So this will be my second stage. I will extrude my feature in one of the axes. Okay, now once I have done this, the computer generate the solid. Okay, that is, it will assume that this entire thing is filled. Okay, then what you want to do, you may use various other features as well, like such as uh, cut function or slotting function. So you may create on, you may probably select this surface, create a circle, and then you will probably use another operation, that is to create slots. Okay, and thus you will get this slot. Okay, similarly you will do for another slot. Okay, and this is how you create a model, isn't it? Okay, so this is how your image is actually being created in any of the CAD models, and we use similar techniques for image processing as well. Okay, that is, we try to simplify the image in basic uh, you know uh, uh, elements such as points, a line, circle, etc. Okay, basic elements. And then we try to define various functions. So which will, let's say in this case, I will probably give a rectangle which is given by a function of r, l and b. Okay, then the next step would be to give extrusion command. So that extrusion command may be stored in another function, let's say e. Okay, and this e is limited to certain height. Okay, so this is the certain height, so e of h, isn't it? Then afterwards what I'm doing, so afterwards I'm again selecting a certain surface. Okay, so in that surface, let's say there are, how many surfaces, 6 surfaces. Okay, so I'm selecting one of the surface, let's say s1, and in that surface I'm drawing a circle, let's say that function is c. Okay, and that c of how much, with certain radius of certain diameter. You may take anything. Okay, so this is how the computer stores the information. And when you, let's say, click on certain file, it will recreate using these functions. Okay, if you have any questions, you can interrupt me and get your doubts clarified. Okay, so in engineering, modeling refers to the way data are represented in the computer memory and the way in which it is visualized. So when we say about modeling, strictly speaking, refers to the way in which data is represented to you on your screen, as well as how it is represented in the computer's memory. Okay, data is stored in a suitable data structure that is easy to access for the visual algorithm. Geometric modeling is a process of capturing the properties of an object or a system using mathematical formulae. Computer geometric modeling is the field that discusses the mathematical method behind the modeling of realistic objects for the computer graphics and computer-aided design. It uses computer to store the data and geometric properties of the system or of the part or of the component. So whatever we have discussed, it is summarized in this point. The first generation CAD program of the 50s were mostly non-interactive. Now we'll be looking into the history of this geometric model, uh, a little bit, actually, not in detail, but just a summary of the history uh, for geometric modeling. In So this CAD programs were initially developed in 50s, and they were usually non-interactive in nature. So what do we mean by interactive in nature is that, let's say if you have opened up a model in any of the softwares. Okay, if you have a 3D model opened up in your in your CAD software, you can rotate or you can interact with the component, isn't it? You may zoom it in. Okay, with the scroll of your mouse, probably you can zoom in or zoom out. Then you can drag or define an axis in a certain way for the part. So those are called as interactive features. And in 50s, these features or interactions were not possible. So if you want to even scale it or scale it up or scale it down or move it from one location to another location, you require to program it. Okay, so the CAD users were required to create program codes to generate the desired 2D geometric shapes. Interactive CAD program began to take shape in 60s and were mostly used in automobile and aerospace industries. The 60s also marked the beginning of development of finite element analysis method for computer stress analysis and CAM for generating machine tool paths. The advent of microprocessors in late 70s boosted computing power of the computers. It also triggered the development of 3D CAD models, 3D CAD programs that were user friendly and most importantly interactive. So if I'm not sure if ever you have checked this, if you do a simulation, it can be in answers, it can, you can use any of the software, you may use Abacus for that matter, any of the CAE software, uh, and if you save it, probably for Abacus it saves in .odf format, open database format. If you go and check the memory that it occupies, even if it is a simple cubical box or a block of metal on which you might have performed, let's say, a compression test, even for such a simple component, you would observe that the space that it occupies in your memory, that is, if you check the memory of an ODB file, it would be in gigabytes. Okay, it will be in few gigabytes, 1 or 2 gigabytes, which in fact at in those days, in 80s especially, was a huge requirement. For nowadays, for us, our mobile has more than 128 space gigabytes of space, isn't it? But that was not the luxury in 80s. So you have to understand that the computational power it takes and the space requirement were not available. The technological understanding or the theoretical development was there, but because of the limitation of the technology of that time, this interactive or interactions that are now possible were limited in those time. Okay, it was at this time that 2D and 3D wireframe were introduced in industry for geometric modeling as a tool to increase productivity. Again, 3D and 2D wireframes is nothing but representing a model using curves and lines. So for example, so let's say if I want to represent a cube, so a cube I can represent, let's say if this is my cube. Okay, so this can be represented using such lines. Okay, it has such lines in them which will give you some sense of curvature if it has some curvature. Okay, so this wireframes were used instead of surfaces. Again, the reason being that the space was not available, the processing capacity was not available. So whenever there was a little bit of improvement, this wireframe came into picture. And today also, very few instances, however, there are few applications of these wireframe models. Okay, during the process of geometric modeling, the computer converts various commands given from within the CAD software into mathematical models, stores them as files, and finally displays them as an image. So this is the process, that is, whenever you interact with the model, if that interaction is permanent in nature, that interaction is saved in the form, first it is converted into mathematical equation, and then that mathematical equation is converted into binary format, and that is saved in the computer's memory. Okay, the geometry models created by the designer can open at any time for reviewing, editing, or analysis. The development of 3D modeling schemes started with 3D wireframes. So like I said in the previous slide, 3D modeling initially started with 3D frames. As a major leap in computer geometric modeling, it was a major leap, because initially only 2D modeling was possible. Either you could see front view, side view, or isometric view, but in two dimensions. But with the advent of this wireframe models, you could visualize with some imagination in 3D image. Okay, in 3D space. It was a major in computer geometric modeling as it allowed designers to use a single object and view it from multiple angles. However, wireframes are susceptible to ambiguity since surface definition is not part of a 3D wireframe. Like I said, it is represented by various lines and curves. Sometimes it actually does not give proper intuition of a certain surface. Okay, it is left to the imagination of the user how he interprets these curves. Uh, to overcome these lacuna or drawback, computer modeling, geometry modeling with surface definitions was the next logical step forward, and this is what we have seen in the past 20 years. With enhanced computer CPU powers, the next enhancement in geometric modeling was solid modeling, which most of us are familiar with. Surface modeling organizes the uh, group's edges that define polygonal surfaces, making it easier for designer to visualize an object. So in solid modeling, you have various edge, then you have vertices, and all these are stored along with its spatial coordinates into the memory. Okay, and then there is also the expected interactions. uh, Yes. So also there are certain interactions, like if you have two edges, what is the distance between those two edges? That is also registered in the memory. Also, let's say if you have four vertices, what is the distance between and what is the relationship between these vertices are also stored in the memory. Okay, and it is ensured that minimum number of interactions are saved. Okay, so let's say if I want to, if I have this vertex, okay, let's, these are the four vertices, and I want to store this information in the memory. Now what I can do is I can define this v1, v2, v3. Okay, and I can save all the coordinates of all these vertices in the memory. Or else what I can do is I can define v1 and any one of these two. Okay, and after defining these two, I can simply have defined the relationship between any other two vertices. Okay, so if I have, let's say, distance between these and this is at a certain angle and at a certain distance, that I can store instead of it storing the entire information and property of another two vertices. So even though now we have the liberty of space and processing capability, we still ensure as engineers, we make sure that we do not misuse that processing capability. We try to optimize the space and processing requirement. Solid modeling allows definition of an object's nodes, edges, and surfaces. It is therefore a complete and unambiguous mathematical representation of a precisely enclosed and filled volume. Unlike the surface modeling method, solid modelers start with solid or used topologic rules to guarantee that all surfaces are stitched together properly. So in next step to wireframe modeling is to define a surface, wherein again, if you go back to our example of defining a cube, in that all the surfaces would be represented. However, if you were to take a cross section of the cube, you would see that it would be inside. Okay, but as and when there was increase in space and processing capability, we moved to a solid modeling, wherein we could see the internal features of a given component as well. Okay, there are two predominant methods for representing solid models: constructive solid geometry and boundary representation. Constructive geometry combines basic solid objects, for example, a rectangular prism, cylinder, cone, sphere, etc. These shapes are simply added or deleted in order to form final solid shape. In boundary representation, objects, they are defined in terms of their spatial boundaries. It defines the points, edges, surfaces of volume, and or issues command that sweep or rotate a defined face into a third dimension to form a solid. The object is then made up of union of these surfaces and completely and precisely enclose a volume. So in case of, so basically you can define, there are two different ways in which you can represent a solid. You can use a constructive solid geometry, okay, or boundary representation. So in these cases you may use Boolean algebra or Boolean functions. So you in case of uh, constructive solid geometry, what you may do is, let's say if I want to create such shape, okay, let's say this is some kind of a house, a primitive hut, okay. So this is equivalent to what? This is equivalent to a rectangle and a triangle, okay. So this triangle plus this rectangle would give you this final image. Okay, so this is how you go about for solid geometry. In case of boundary representation, what you will do, in case of boundary representation, you will represent these points, okay, or these intersections, okay. You will define these intersections, sorry. So you will define these intersections. So these are how many? For five intersections, and then you will define it with 5 intersection, then plus how many lines? 1 2 3 4 5 6 lines, okay. So 5 eyes plus 6 lines, okay, and this is sufficient. Okay, so this is your this is how you represent it using spatial boundaries. Okay, so these are the two different types in which you can represent a geometry. CAD programs that use solid modeling concept help design engineers to view the part or object as if they were really manufactured. So this is one of the advantages that you would use a solid modeling. The CAD software can even change the perspective and viewing angles. So you can either see a front view, side view, isometric view, parallel view, parallax view, any views that you are interested in, which simply click of a button, it's made available to you. So that is another advantage of solid modeling. The heart of computer geometric modeling software is kernel. Okay, so it is either uh, called either a geometric modeling kernel or solid modeling kernel. So if both of them mean one and the same thing depending on the industry that you are in. It is the code that determines how the image you see on the screen is actually described with maths. So now we have been talking about that each of the features of a given solid can be represented using certain function, isn't it? So what kind of a function it is as the solid model has been assigned is the job of kernel. Okay, the kernel will decide what kind of functions it should save and what interactions it should save. Okay, so kernels are important because they are mathematical models for real and theoretical objects. So this kernel also, so when we say kernels, it is nothing but a set of program. Okay, so whatever you may, so let me draw it for you. So this is your computer screen. Okay, so whatever you see on the computer screen is nothing but your GUI. Okay, that is graphical user interface. Now behind that there is an kernel. Okay, so whatever you may interact, that interaction will be recorded in kernel, and that kernel will uh, have some function, okay, which will convert your interaction into zeros and one. Okay, and this is stored in your memory. Now let's say if you want, now you have made the changes and you have saved it. Now this uh, binary form of representation is available in the memory. Now let's say if you want to retrieve it, you close the software, you again open it, and then you open the file. What happens? This memory passes the information to the kernel, then kernel again uses various algorithms to convert that uh, you know information, and is then made available to view on the graphical user interface. Okay, so this is why kernel is very important, because if your kernel is very poor, okay, if it is not able to define a certain geometry into mathematical format, okay, and if it is not able to do that, then it cannot save a proper uh, information. Okay, the information that will be that is resulted from this kernel output will not be correct or optimal. Okay, so probably what you must have sometimes seen this bug as well. Okay, that you might have saved the information in certain way, but when you retrieve it, at that time you see some modification changes. Okay, that is because probably your kernel is not efficient or optimal. That is why this kernel plays a very important role in modeling. Okay, so remember that what is the job of kernel? It is nothing but they are mathematical models of real and theoretical objects. They describe a solid in mathematical format, and then they store it and they retrieve it from the memory. Okay, kernels are important because they are mathematical models of real and theoretical objects. Describing shapes in a mathematical representation involves making choices about how each shape is calculated and stored. Needless to say, the better a kernel, the better the geometric modeling software. In addition to all these functions required by programmers, a good kernel should also be reliable and quick. So, what are the required characteristics of a good kernel? That it should be reliable and it should be fast. Okay, that is the concern for engineers. The quality of kernel affects the quality of the entire CAD system. So this was all about geometric modeling for imaging. Now we'll start with the imaging requirement. Okay, so the reason for studying this topic is to understand if we want to do processing on image. Let's first try to understand what are the requirements. Okay, given the diversity of image types and sources, there are several general criteria we can prescribe for image intended for computer processing and analysis. Now, from here onwards, we'll assume that whenever we talk about image processing, it is always digital image processing, and we are making use of computers to process and analyze the given digital image. Okay. Now, again, there are various types of images. You can have an image that comes out of let's say scanning electron microscope, that is SEM image. Then you can also have it from TEM. Okay, that is gives you the microstructure or the phase change to a microscopic level. Or you may have an image that comes from your mobile phone. Okay, it can be in again different format. It can have an extension of .png, it can have an extension of .tiff. So there are various image types and there are various image sources. So there is an requirement to standardize all these image types and sources so that anyone can interact with those images and can understand, at least be able to visualize the image. The first is the need for global uniformity. Okay, so there is a requirement for standard, and that is why the formats are available. Okay. The same type of feature should look the same way where it appears in the image. This implies that brightness and color value should be the same, and consequently that illumination must be uniform and stable for images acquired at different times. So uh, now this statement is more towards the practical application of imaging. Uh, so let's say if you are working on developing a setup which requires the system to classify the object which is visible, which is flowing on, let's say, conveyor belt. It needs to classify the object, and it also needs to measure the dimensions of a given object. So in that case, if you will no doubt be training the data set, and there would be some little bit of fluctuation. But whenever you're training the setup, it is important for you to provide the images which are of more or less stable brightness and stable colors. Okay, and for that to happen, you have to have a stable source of illumination. Okay, the requirements of uniformity limits the kind of surface that are normally imaged. Planar surfaces, or at least simple and known ones, are much easier to deal with than complex surfaces. So if you have ever used toolmaker's microscope, you would know that uh, we can only focus at a certain distance. So whatever is visible on that plane is very clear to visualize. But if there is a feature which is at a different height from the focused plane, that particular feature is not clearly visible, isn't it? So same is the problem with any of the imaging, that it has a certain focus, and anything beyond the focus is probably blurred out or is not sharp enough. So modern phones have the capability of multiple focus, and they try to sharpen the image, and that is one of the image processing technique. Okay, simply connected surfaces are much easier to interpret than one with arcs and loops that hide some of the structure. So whenever you may work with microscopes, you see this kind of issues. Okay, we in our lab we have machine vision system which is capable of looking at the microstructure of the this given surface, and we have to focus it at a certain height, and whatever features lie in that plane of the focus is very visible, or the clarity of the features is very good to make an interpretation. But let's say if the feature or the topology or the surface of the component is not plane, but it has some waviness, and that waviness is uh, quite large, in that case it becomes difficult for us to interpret the actual nature of the surface. Then in that case, what we would need to do is we'll probably need to slice the the topology and then stitch it back to have a proper understanding of the topology. Okay, features that have precedence problems, that is these problems in which some features hide entirely or in part behind others, present difficulties for interpretation or measurements. Elimination that casts strong shadows, especially to one side, it is also undesirable in most of the cases. So shadows in case of measurements, you would see as we go on further in this top subject matter, shadows is actually a big concern if we really want to go for uh, measurements. Okay, so uh, just to give you an idea, let's say if you want to measure this object, okay, which is this box, let's assume it is in 3D, and your light source is on this side, it will cast a shadow on this direction. You have a camera which is in the plane in which you are viewing this image right now. Okay, so if it casts a shadow in this direction, you want to measure this length probably, okay, the length between these and this. So if you have a shadow in this, uh, the problem is in edge detection. Okay, because if you want to measure, for you it is easy to measure because you can understand that okay, the edge is clearly lying over here. But for the if you want to automate this process, you need to train the system to detect the edges first. It has to understand what it is seeing, and for that we use various edge detection algorithms. And this shadow creates a problem, okay, because it gives a false edge detection. And that is a big problem for research even nowadays. But there are different ways in which you can go about this. But for now, remember that in image processing, this shadows are one of the undesirable uh, captures that are available in the image. The exception occurs when well-spaced features cast shadow that do not interfere with each other. The shadow's length can be used with the known geometry to calculate feature heights. So, for example, if you are doing an aerial observation, and in that case you see, let's say, a shadow casted by a building. So, using the principle of geometry, you can, and the position of the sun at that given instance, you can understand what is the height of that particular building. And this is usually done to understand the growth of vegetation. Okay, so whenever there is tree plantation carried out every year, you cannot go and measure the height of each and every tree. Okay, it is simply labor intensive. So what you can do is, in that case, is simply take aerial images of the trees. By using making use of the shadows, you can understand what how much the tree has grown from the previous year. Okay, you can find the height of the tree presently, and you can compare it with the previous year's growth. Okay, so sometimes shadows are a big problem, and in very few instances they are advantages. Okay, measurements of dimensions require that geometry of the imaging system be well known. Knowing the magnification of a microscope or altitude of a satellite is usually straightforward. So let's say if I take an image, okay, so let's assume this is a carbon nanotube and you have taken this image, and now you want to know the length of the sides. Okay, let's assume this is a hexagon and you want to know the length of the side size of a given nanotube. Now can I simply use my ruler to check this dimension? Can I use my regular scale? It would be foolish, isn't it? So first I have to understand what is the focus. Okay, how much focus have I used? Okay, and then I need to have a comparative scale. Okay, so let's say you must have seen in some of the images they provide this scale below the image. Okay, that says that if you go from, let's say, from this distance to this distance, okay, this distance represents 1 nanometer. Okay, or you must have seen in maps as well. Okay, in map also they mention such kind of a scale where it says that okay, this distance is approximately equivalent to, let's say, 5 kilometers. Okay, so these scales are important, and if you know the microscope that you're using, or if you know the altitude of the satellite, it is easy for you to do these calculations. Okay, but in some instances it is not straightforward. Calibrating the lateral scale can be accomplished either by knowledge of the optics or by using images of the known scale or standards. So one way is to directly know the the various optical parameters, or secondly, you probably can have a scale. Okay, you can put an object of known dimension over here. You know that the length of that object is this much. Then you can use that to measure, to take a relative dimension of this element. Okay, that is another way. When the weaving geometry is more complicated, either because of the surface is not planar or the weaving angle is not perpendicular, the measurement is more difficult and requires determination of geometries first. Okay, so for example, this view of this image, for example, okay, it is not perpendicular in nature. So for me, to simply say, okay, I have a scale for this optical positioning which says this much dimension is 1 nanometer, but this is not the actual length because I am not viewing it in a perpendicular direction. So probably I may have to reorient this. Okay, to reorient this, then I have to know this theta angle. Okay, if I know this theta angle, then I know that this length is nothing but L cos theta, isn't it? And then this L cos theta, you know, this has to compare with this 1 nanometer of scale. So these are some of the ways in which you can uh, try to analyze the image, and these are few of the hurdles which may come, and thus there is a requirement that you should know the scales. Okay, measuring brightness information such as density or color value requires a very stable illumination source and sensor. Like I said, fluctuation of illumination may cause fluctuation in the shadows, fluctuation in the way in which the material reflects the colors, and that is why it is important that you have a stable illumination. Color measurements are easily affected by changes in the color temperature of an incandescent bulb due to minor voltage fluctuation as the bulb warms up or ages. Fluorescent lighting, especially when used in light boxes with X-ray films or uh, uh, densitometry gels, may be unstable or may introduce interference in solid state cameras due to the high frequency flickering of the fluorescent tube. So this is just an example how uh, the lighting that you provide can interfere with the quality of the image that you get. So this is just to underline the fact that illumination plays a very important role in getting proper images. A bright specular reflection, so this is nothing but your mirror like reflection which may cause saturation booming or shifts in camera gains. So this again is a well known uh, phenomenon. If let's say if you are standing in front of a window and you try to take a selfie, you would see that there is an unrequired reflections. So these are again challenges in imaging, and that is why we have to orient the source of light in a proper fashion. Okay, so let's talk about the imaging requirement, the summary of what is required for good imaging. First and foremost, you should understand what is the storing and filing of images, what format it is saved, how much storage is required. Okay, what capabilities do you have, and accordingly the images should be uh, 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 acquired. Enhancement of images for visual examination require a large number of pixels and adequate pixel depth so that the image can be acquired with enough information to perform filtering. So let's say if you want to further analyze the image, you have to carry out various image processing. Then it is important that you need to have sufficient information in the image. And when I say sufficient information, whenever you increase in information, that means the pixel of the number of pixels that are available in the image should increase. Okay. Measurement of dimensions and density values can often be performed with modest image resolution if the magnification or illumination can be adjusted beforehand to make the best use of image sensor. Then quality control applications usually do not involve absolute measurements so much as watching for variation. In many cases, this is handled simply by subtracting a reference image from each acquired image point by point to detect gross changes. So in quality control especially, the application is quite straightforward, where you won't need to perform complex measurements. You have a standard set of trained image, and whatever image you may capture, that needs to just be compared with the standard or the database image. Okay, so in a way quality control applications is bit easier than measurement of dimensions. Structural research. Okay, so the requirement here is to detect the gross change. Okay, so for that your edges should be sharp. Okay, let's say if you want to if you are manufacturing shafts, the images that you may acquire, in that case the images should be free from shadows, so that the comparison is easy to perform. Okay, and in case of measurement of dimensions, you should know the geometric features, the parameters that you're using, so that you can create a proper scale. Structural research in either 2 or 3 dimensions usually start with image measurement and has the same requirement as noted above, plus the ability to subject the measurement values to appropriate stereological and statistical analysis. So you may have measurement values, but that measurement value should be in proper format to perform statistical analysis. Okay. Pattern recognition is generally considered to be the high-end task of computer-based image analysis. It ranges in complexity from locating and recognizing isolated objects belonging to a few well-established classes to much more open-ended problems. So pattern recognition is a little bit complex in nature, where you need to do object detection, object classification, so on and so forth. And for that, you need supervised learning or unsupervised learning, and you need to use various algorithms which will classify your objects into certain class. Okay. Now another requirement is that of the sensors. To put it simply, sensors is nothing but which registers the image of the real world object. So in our case, let's say if you're using mobile phones to capture image, the camera in your mobile phone acts as a sensor. Similarly, if you're in case of uh, 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 earth based radio frequency operated imaging, which takes image of the space, the antenna that acquires or captures the radio frequency waves is working as a sensor. Most of the image processing instances require computer-based image processing and analysis system, and by interference, the image acquisition hardware to duplicate some operations of the human visual system. In many cases, they do so in ways that copy the algorithms we believe are used in vision, but in other quite different approaches are used. While no computer-based image system can come close to duplicating the overall performance of human vision in its flexibility or speed, there are specific tasks at which computer surpasses any human. So most often priority is given to uh, uh, to design a system in such way that we may acquire image similar to how a human interprets an image. Okay, but again, computer being computer, they are not humans. We have to program them, and we have the limitation of how we can program them. Various algorithms can differ in the way in which humans can interfere, inference, or understand the image. And there are some pros and cons to how we provide these algorithms to the system. So it can detect many more imaging signals than just visual lights. For this is one of the pros, that our eyes are limited to the a certain spectrum, but we can introduce various sensors which can take into account the entire electromagnetic spectrum. Okay, and it is unaffected by the outside influences, fatigue, distraction. This is again the benefit of using the sensors. Perform absolute measurement rather than relative comparison, can transform images that other spaces are beyond normal human experience. For example, Fourier or Hughes space to extract hidden data. So we can use Fourier transformation, we can use various neural networks to get hidden information from the image. Okay, can apply statistical technique to see through the chaotic and noisy data that may be present to identify underlying trends and similarities. So you can use various regression models, you can use classification techniques to get some pattern in an image for which for a normal human eye may not make a lot of sense. The dramatic reductions in price and improvement in capability of digital cameras brought about as a result of consumer demand offers some intriguing possibilities for technical image processing and analysis. So, no doubt we require sensors, and fortunate for us, the economics do allow us to acquire more and more sensors. Okay. The critical flaw, besides the optical limitation, is that these cameras use compression to squeeze a lot of images into their limited memory. Now, again, it's not that we have sensors and they are of without any flaws. They have their own limitations, and the limitations are how much information they can store. And if you want to have more and more images, no doubt the quality of the images needs to degrade, and that is done by squeezing images into using compression techniques. So that's all that I wanted to discuss in this session. Thank you very much.